private equity in dance hurts marginalized and minority communities. All right, so that is what we're talking about today. Yeah, I haven't had a video in a couple of weeks. May has been absolutely chaotic, insane, busy. I'm sure it's been like that for a lot of you dance teachers, dance parents. Yeah, May is a crazy season. We just wrapped up recital, which was last weekend. And so I have a little bit of downtime. So my name is Taylor. I am a a dance educator, arts advocate, arts administrator. Wow. And I just share my thoughts, my ideas, my opinions, my resources on all things dance. So today we are talking about private equity in the dance world. So let's jump right into it. So if you start to look at where dance is going, especially like in the competition world, the studio world, and like youth training spaces, um, we need to have this conversation, an honest conversation. We need to talk about what happens when dance becomes less about community training, education, and access, and more about profit, growth, market share, and your return on investment. Because when we talk about private equity and private equity entering the dance space, the goal is not to just keep things running, right? The goal becomes to grow, to scale, to make the business more valuable. And when that business becomes dance, we need to start asking the question, who gets left behind in this investment strategy? Because from where I stand, right, I've taught in multiple different venues, communities. I can't think of the word, but I've taught in public schools, private studios, community spaces, and the answer is always the same. Who gets left behind? The marginalized students, Black and brown families, working class parents, small community based studios, the teachers and staff who, in some cases, are already underpaid, and children who cannot afford dance to become more expensive than it already is. So, before we even get into this equity conversation, we as a dance community have to be honest and admit something to ourselves, right? So, dance already has an access problem. If you have been around dance long enough, you know technique classes cost money, competition costs money, costumes cost money, shoes cost money, conventions cost money, travel costs, private lessons, audition fees cost money, summer intensives cost money. And then after families still pay for all of that up front, there are still unexpected costs that come down the road, right? Hotel rooms for competitions, conventions, summer intensives, you name it, gas, food, parking, makeup, tights, extra rehearsals, missed work days, work opportunities for travel time. And sometimes the emotional pressure of watching kids get more opportunities simply because their families can afford it. So when I hear people say dance is for everyone, in my heart, I truly believe that. But the structure and the infrastructure does not always prove that. Because if we're honest with ourselves, a lot of dance spaces are only accessible to everybody in theory, right? So in real life, access to these spaces often depend on money, transportation, time, neighborhood, family support, and whether the adults in charge are willing to build systems that include more than just the families who can pay the most. That is why this private equity conversation is so important, because when a field already has access issues, adding more pressure to make profit can make those issues even worse. What is private equity in simple terms? So, private equity is when investment firms buy or invest in companies with the goal of making those companies more profitable and more valuable. Sometimes that means a better system, sometimes it means stronger marketing, sometimes it means expanding into new cities, sometimes it means buying up multiple businesses and putting them under one like larger umbrella company. And in some industries, people may look and say, that's just business. But dance is not just business. Dance is also education, culture, childhood development, mentorship, community. Dance is healing. Dance is history. So when investors enter dance spaces, I think we have to ask different questions than we would ask if they were buying like just a regular product company, because dancers are not products. Children are not acquisition numbers, and teachers are not just labor costs. And the communities that these spaces are in are not just markets to expand into. So, what actually happens when profit becomes the focus and the center? So, when profit becomes the center of dance, the energy changes. And sometimes it changes slowly enough that people don't even notice it right away. At first, it might look like more opportunities, more competitions, more cities, more conventions, more branded events, more merch, more live stream packages, more photo packages, more VIP experiences, more awards, more ways to be seen. And some of that can be really exciting. I absolutely understand why families would be drawn to it. I understand why dancers want to be in the room. I understand why studios want visibility. I understand why teachers want their students to have access to high level faculty. But at the same time, we have to ask, are we creating more opportunities, or are we creating more things that families feel pressured to pay for? Because those things are not always one and the same. A real opportunity should open a door, but sometimes in the dance space, opportunity starts to feel like a bill. And for marginalized and minority communities, that really matters, because when the cost of being seen keeps going up and students who are already have the least access are the ones that are going to be pushed out first. With the competition and the convention pipeline, let's talk about competition and convention culture, because this is where I think a lot of families feel the most pressure, right? Competitions can be fun, they can build confidence, they can give dancers performance experience, they expose students to new styles and new teachers. And I mean, I work at a competition studio. I'm definitely, and my kid dances at a competition studio, right? I am not against dance competition at all. But we have to be honest about the system. Sometimes a dancer's visibility is tied to how many events they can attend, how many cities they can travel to, how many solos they can afford. Can they go to nationals? Can they pay for convention classes? Can they afford the scholarship weekend? Can they afford the travel? Can they afford the hotel that's attached to the event? Can they afford to be in the room over and over and over again? So when the industry starts moving towards bigger ownership groups and investor back expansion, this is a risk that the system becomes more pay to play. And that's where our marginalized students, our low income students, our Black and brown families get hurt, because talent is everywhere, but access is not. There are brilliant dancers in the public schools. There are brilliant dancers in community centers. There are brilliant dancers in church basements. There are brilliant dancers in small studios that can't afford the biggest competition circuits. There are brilliant dancers whose parents are working two jobs and can't afford to take off for a 4-day convention weekend. There are brilliant dancers who will never be seen by the right people because their family can't afford the room where those people are teaching. And that should bother us, because if the industry only rewards the dancers who can afford visibility, then we are not truly, really finding and investing in the best dancers. We are finding the best resourced dancers. How does this all affect the smaller studios? It affects those studios in small towns, especially studios in Black, brown, rural, and working communities, because a small studio owner is not just running a business. A lot of times, that studio owner is also the teacher, the receptionist, the costume manager, the counselor, the fundraiser, the janitor, so the social media person, and the person who stays late when a child's parent is running behind. Community studios do way more than just teach steps. They create safe spaces. They teach discipline. They give kids somewhere to go after school. They help children build confidence. They give families a sense of belonging. But when bigger companies dominate the competition and convention space, small studios can feel like they have to keep up. They may feel pressure to attend more events, pressure to spend more money, pressure to prove that they belong. They feel the pressure to offer the same access as larger, wealthier studios, and that pressure rolls downhill. It lands on the teacher, it lands on the parent, and eventually it will land on the child. For a family with extra money, an extra fee may be annoying. For another family, that same fee may be the reason why that child has to sit out. And that is the part that we just can't simply ignore. So here is another part of the conversation that is extremely important to me, especially when we are talking about minority communities. A lot of what makes dance profitable comes from culture. Black culture, Latino culture, African diasporic movement, hip hop, jazz, tap, social dance, street dance, club culture, and community movement traditions. The same movements that are created in marginalized communities often become marketable once they are packaged for mainstream audiences. This is not something that's new. Dance history always has a pattern of taking from communities while not always creating or investing back into those communities. I've seen this in jazz, we have seen this in tap, we have seen this in hip hop, we have seen this in social dance trends. We see this in the way the Black movement becomes popular, profitable, and branded, while Black dancers, Black teachers, and Black communities still have to fight for respect, pay, and ownership. So when private equity enters dance, we have to ask, who owns the platform? Who profits from the culture? Who gets hired as faculty? Who gets promoted? Who gets leadership positions? Who gets to be the face of the brand? And who is only brought in when the brands need flavor, diversity, our culture, credibility? Because there's a difference between celebrating culture and extracting from it. I'm going to say that one more time. There is a difference between celebrating culture and extracting from it. There's a difference between inclusion and using Black and brown bodies to sell an experience. And if dance companies are going to profit from cultural forms that came from marginalized communities, then those communities need to be more than marketing material. They need ownership, they need leadership, they need fair pay, they need real access. They need scholarships that are not just symbolic. They need pathways that do not depend on being able to afford the most expensive rooms. Another concern I have is what happens to the education. So what happens to dance education when everything has to scale? Real dance education takes time. It takes relationship, it takes correction, it takes patience, it takes context, it takes history, it takes a teacher who sees the whole child, not just the body doing the step. But scalable dance experiences can sometimes become more about hype than depth, more about brand than training, more about the wristband than learning, more about the award than the artistry, more about being in the room than understanding why that movement matters. And I say this as someone who loves when dancers get excited. I love seeing kids inspired. I love when a teacher can light a fire in a student and you can see it. But we also have to ask if the education is deep enough. Are students learning where the movement comes from? Are they learning the cultural history? Are they learning about the people who built these forms? Are they learning about respect? Are they learning about community? Or are they just learning combinations fast enough to post them online? Because that matters, especially for Black dance forms. You cannot take the movement and leave the history. You cannot take the rhythm and leave the people. You cannot take the style and leave the structure. If dance becomes only content, product, and performance, we are losing something very sacred. And there's another question that I think we need to ask. When dance becomes more corporate, who gets protected? Are children protected? Are teachers protected? Are families protected? Are independent studios protected? Are low-income dancers protected? Are Black and brown artists protected? Or is the business model protected first? Because when an industry becomes more consolidated, there can be fewer choices. fewer independent spaces, and fewer affordable alternatives, fewer local events that understand the actual community. And when families have fewer choices, companies have more power. They can raise prices, they can control access, they can shape what success looks like. They can make dancers feel like they have to participate in their ecosystem if they want to matter. And that's dangerous because dance should not make children feel like they are invisible if they cannot afford the biggest stages. So I am not against growth, but I am against forgetting the mission. Now, I want to be fair. Growth is not always bad. Better systems can help. More organized events can help. Professional production can help. Technology can help. National platforms can help dancers be seen. And yes, businesses need to make money to survive. I wholeheartedly understand that. But there is a difference between making money to support the mission and changing the mission to make more money. And that is what I care about. Because dance has always been bigger than business. For many of us, dance is where we found our voice. It's where we learn discipline. It's where we learn confidence. It's where we learn how to walk into a room and take up space. It's where we learn how to tell stories our words couldn't even hold yet. For marginalized communities, dance has also been a way to preserve culture, resist oppression, build identity, and create joy in spaces where joy was not always easy. So when investors look at dance and only see growth market, they are missing the point. Dance is not just an industry. For some, it's a lifeline. So what do we do? Because I don't want this video to just be doom and gloom, but I think we do need to start asking better questions. If a dance company is growing, ask who benefits from the growth. If a competition is expanding, ask whether the access is expanding too. If a convention is raising prices, ask what scholarship support is being created for families who can't afford it. If a company is using Black and Brown dance forms, ask if Black and Brown teachers are being paid, credited, and placed into leadership. If a studio is pushing more events, ask if every dancer is able to participate without shame. If a brand says that they care about the community, ask how much money is going back into actual communities. And for parents, I want to say this. You are not a bad parent if you cannot afford every event. You are not failing your child because you cannot pay for every solo, every convention, every intensive, or every extra opportunity. Your child's love for dance is not less valuable because your budget has limits. And for teachers and studio owners, especially those serving marginalized communities, I see you. I know you are trying to keep the lights on. I know you are trying to give your students access. I know you are trying to compete with bigger studios that have more resources. I know you are caring more than people will ever even realize. But I hope that we can continue building spaces where dancers are valued for who they are and not just what they can afford. What would a better model look like? A better dance industry would not punish families for having financial limits. A better industry would create real scholarship pathways. Not just one scholarship for the show, but real access. A better dance industry would support small studios instead of making them feel like they have to constantly buy into bigger systems to be seen. A better dance industry would invest in public school programs because if we really care about access, we cannot ignore the schools. A better dance industry would bring high quality teaching into community centers, public spaces, and neighborhoods that have often been overlooked. A better dance industry would make sure cultural forms are taught with context. A better dance industry would pay teachers fairly. A better dance industry would make room for Black and Brown leadership and not just Black and Brown performance. A better dance industry would understand that dance is not only about creating stars, it's about creating people. People with confidence, people with discipline, people with imagination, people with connection to their bodies, people with connection to their culture, people who know that their stories matter. When we talk about private equity in dance, I do not only want us to talk about business deals. I want us to talk about the students, the children, talk about access. I want us to talk about the parent who's trying to decide between a dance fee and a bill. I want us to talk about the small studio owner who's doing everything they can to keep dance alive in their community. I want us to talk about the Black and Brown dancers whose culture makes the industry money. whose communities are still fighting for resources. I want us to talk about what happens when art becomes too expensive for the people who help create it, because that is the real issue. Dance should grow, dance should evolve, dance should reach more people. If dance only grows in a way that leaves marginalized communities behind, we have to ask whether or not the growth is actual progress. Because dance does not belong to the people who can pay the most. Dance belongs to the child moving in the living room. Dance belongs to the students in the public school gym. Dance belongs to the community center. Dance belongs to the church basement. Dance belongs to the small studio trying to survive. Dance belongs to the cultures that created these movements before they were branded, packaged, and sold. And if we forget that, we may build a bigger dance industry, but we will lose the soul of why dance mattered in the first place. So, my question is this: as dance continues to become more commercial, more corporate, more investor backed, how do we make sure the people responsible for shaping dance culture are not the first ones priced out of it? Because that is the conversation we need to have. All right, friends, I'm sure you can tell this conversation is deeply important to me and I'm very passionate about it. So please share this out with your fellow dance community and let me know what your thoughts and opinions are in the comments about private equity in the dance space. And thank you for supporting this channel. Continue to like, subscribe, all of the things, so I can continue to create content.